Hello and welcome to the Namaste Trauma Free podcast. So, if you are listening or tuning in on SoundCloud or Apple TV, I thank you. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, I thank you as well. Welcome back. So, I'm actually recording both of these at the same time. So, I am just getting the setup right when it comes to YouTube. I think I can finally put my face and make it personable. I've done that in the recent past, and just in this new season, just fine tuning that just for individuals on YouTube. All right, so enough of that disclaimer. And my name is Tanya. I'm a trauma informed yoga teacher. I am a trauma survivor and coach and wellness facilitator. I also self published the Happy Deck, a trauma informed deck, 33 guided tools, resources, cards that'll help you in your very own healing practice. So today we are going to talk about trauma and Feng Shui. You're probably saying, how on earth do those two go together? And I will go over that. If you are watching me on YouTube, you will see me just kind of looking at my notes here. So I thank you for your grace and allowing me to present this information to you. The purpose of this podcast, if this is your first time tuning in, if this is, if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. But if you are new to this YouTube and this podcast, the reason my mission for doing the work that I do on and off the mat, but the podcast is to offer healing. The podcast is to offer awareness, healing, and inspirational tips on how to reclaim your life after trauma. So as I continue my journey, it's allowed me to fine tune and really figure that out, why I am doing this podcast. And it's really to offer awareness. It's to offer some inspiration and just how to live after trauma if that's shown up in your life. And I think, no one's left out in that, unfortunately. So trauma and Feng Shui, how on earth do those two go together? I will dive into that. So trauma recovery can be challenging, right? So as we navigate trauma, and we're on this journey to getting settled back into our body, back into our life. So from navigating the home space, social and economic priorities, it's essential for survivors to maintain a clear and calming space. I cannot say that enough. I've found that in my life is, less is more. If you've, way back, I believe season 1, season 2, I talk about, how clutter finds its way in our wallets. And there's the journey of minimalism. And I've spoken to individuals, and they've stated that is how they were able to just kind of maintain balance in life. So trauma can really paralyze the physical and emotional state that creates attachment to things, to people, to memories, and to sometimes food around us. Okay. So in this podcast session, I like to call these sessions, as I do the work as yoga therapy, I do believe these recorded podcasts are little mini sessions, right? So I'll discuss the importance of keeping your home, your work, your car clear of clutter, organize and structure for a peaceful and smoother transition to healing. So let's dive in. Right? So clutter and how it manifests in our life. So clutter is a collection of things lying around in an untidy mess, because we have to break it down. So what is clutter? And feel free to grab your notes, something to write on, or or replay this back if you feel like you heard something that resonated. But clutter is a collection of things lying around in an untidy mess, a lack of order, foundation, and structure. It's important, it's essential. This is how we need to navigate, and we have to look at the foundation, what's keeping us from moving forward, right? What's keeping us, because stress is fear, and clutter causes stress. But we'll get into that because I'm jumping ahead. So clutter manifests when someone has lacked a sense of control or order in their life. So according to Dr. Lynn Gilberg in WebMD, the article states that most people who experience clutter tend to repeat the same narrative of feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and non-productive. So I want you to really, take a moment to think about, if, mentally, if you're not in your home space, or you're not in your workspace, or you're not in your car, but there's clutter in any one of those spaces, take a moment to, think about how those items began to pile up, and really tune into the body, and figure out, are you feeling sensations of being overwhelmed, anxious, or stagnant? Because if you answered yes to any of those, then chances are there's something that you're ready to release. And I'm just kind of taking a segue here. I really, this is one of my favorite topics, clearing the clutter. Just because we're approaching spring, and that's why I decided to go ahead. We're in the month of March, coming up to April, and we're coming up to spring, or we're in spring if you're already in that mindset and it's your favorite month like mine. It's important that we begin the process of purging, begin the process of releasing anything, and begin the process of connecting the dots to what it is in which has allowed us to feel unproductive, overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and see if that is attached to the clutter or pile that you have somewhere within the home space, workspace, or car. And it goes a lot deeper than that, and we'll get to that. So learning how someone can experience this sort of trauma can begin after sudden loss of a loved one, employment, medical diagnosis, or a traumatic event. So when we begin to tune into the body and we start to we examine our space to figure out when did the trauma show up, and we can begin to potentially connect the dots to that space of clutter. Okay. So now that we know what clutter is, we know how it can manifest, right? So sudden loss of a loved one, employment, medical diagnosis, or some other traumatic event. And so now that we know how it manifests, then let's take a look and figure out what impacts it can really have on the physical body and the emotional body, okay? So these types of habits can also create physical challenges with breathing, right? So now we're looking at the physical space. So dust, pet dander, and mold, right? So now we're connecting the dots. We're doing this together. We're thinking about the traumatic event when it happened. We now know what clutter is, and we're feeling the sensations in the body as to, at what point after this traumatic event and I started moving through life, it started to make me feel overwhelmed. It started to make me feel anxious. I didn't feel prepared. And so I started to, and I'll give some examples, leave the laundry, right? Allowed the laundry to pile up. Or I let the mail, every time I got mail, I just wasn't, it began to pile up, and I allowed the papers to sit on the desk. Okay? So now we're starting to paint a picture as to what it looks like. We're starting to tune into our body, right? And figure out what that feeling was, right? Maybe we were too stressed, too anxious to move the clutter. Okay? So now it's affecting our health, right? Because now there's dust, there's pet dander if you have any pets, mold, right? It can also impact the mind, the mental clutter. Now we're waking up stressed. Now we're waking up with a lot of things on our mind. We're waking up not ready and wanting to move through the day, right? We're starting to become forgetful. So according to Very Well Mind, clutter can really take a toll on us mentally in a form of stress and anxiety. Okay, this causes you to lose track of time and money. And I think we're in a space now, we don't want to lose those things, right? We know how valuable our time and money can be. And so we begin to waste time looking for keys, our wallets, our phones, or important documents, okay? So just imagine kind of coming back and just thinking about the time that you potentially was just moving ahead, not really allowing yourself to slow down, and now you wind up with additional fees on a bill, right? Because you couldn't find it, you didn't write down the date, right? Because what happens is that clutter has a domino effect in our life. Because everything else begins to become imbalanced. Yeah? Or how about, running out the door and we're like, where did I put the keys? Right? We're not settled in our body. We're not settled in our mind. The importance of having a planner, my goodness. And I'll go back and I'll tell a story even for me. I would say at the beginning of the year, there was so much that was kind of piled up that I know I needed to get to. December. I had lost my wallet. So I was like, okay, there's so much, to prepare for the new year and to get clear. And as I was throwing something out, I believe, my wallet was attached and I had all these bags and I'm, trying to think. I wasn't using my planner. I wasn't writing anything down and transitioning into space from one space to the other, and I lost my wallet. And I was not allowing myself. I was stressed towards the end of the year. And I'll go a little bit deeper. I had lost my pet, my little Daisy. If you watched, other episodes, you may have heard little Daisy, and Daisy is no longer with us. She transitioned, and that was really hard for me. I was it was sudden loss. That was traumatic, and I wasn't allowing myself to sit still and heal through that grief. And so because of that, not wanting to sit with that and honor that in that place in my body, it caused me to do more than enough. And so I had lost my wallet. And it caused me to, lose time and money, right? Because when you order replacements, there's a sense of loss because you're spending extra that you don't necessarily have to spend to get those things replaced. So it can create a domino effect. So, being sure that I'm able to pinpoint the traumatic event, right? I'm able to figure out the sensations. I was overwhelmed. I was stressed. I wasn't allowing myself to sit still through the grief. Okay. and it had an impact. That impact was I was frantic for a minute. I allowed myself to be frantic. I was anxious, slightly overwhelmed, and I lost time and I lost money. Okay. So, learning how someone can experience, learning how someone can experience the trauma of sudden loss, a loved one, employment, medical diagnosis, or a pet. Okay. So, not only that, but I'll take it even further. It shows up in our diet, right? So this later causes us to not want to cook dinner, right? Or make it to the gym if that's in your practice, or to the mat, or, to meditate, okay? So that is how it shows up in the body. So now we're not wanting to cook, we're not wanting to move the body. So we begin to emotionally eat processed foods that hurt our diet, right? We begin to rush. And so now, and you may have a visual, and for me, I had a visual as I was creating this episode. I immediately, my mind went to, I can't recall the exact name, but on TLC, I believe the show Hoarders, right? There's a psychological thing that happens when it comes to clutter, and you hear the individuals on the show and they say, I lost my husband, or, there was I lost my home, and, things began to pile up. I was overwhelmed, and, sometimes we're unable to identify that, and life happens. But, this podcast is, inspiration on how to reclaim ourselves. And they hire professionals to get that support. And so we move on here in this topic. And so in Feng Shui, right? So now we go into Feng Shui. So in Feng Shui, releasing clutter allows us to keep positive chi running through our body, temple, and home space. So regardless if you practice Feng Shui, or Buddhism, or any of that, but the idea is to bring the body and mind back to a space of equilibrium, right? And so we want to bring back this chi, this positive energy, right? We want to get our life back. We want to get back to the things that we enjoy. And so that's what Feng Shui can support. It can support the space of positivity and a clearing of the mind and the body. Okay, so I'll express a little bit more about Feng Shui. So Feng Shui is the Chinese traditional practice which claims to use energy forces to harmonize an individuals with the surrounding environment. So the term Feng Shui literally means wind and water, right? So allowing that energy flow, wood, earth, fire, wind, and metal, to run through the body. So they use those 5 principles. So again, this may be foreign to anyone, where it's just not something that you practice. You may have heard of Feng Shui, but I do want to, just share that with you, with that, if you haven't had the opportunity to look up the definition, that is what Feng Shui means, is to bring in balance and bring in, that harmony into your home space, your workspace, your car, your body temple, okay? And when we experience trauma, we create these practices to bring ourselves back to equilibrium, okay? Whatever that looks like. It looks different for everyone, whether it's, pretty intense, or, just small practices, weekly, bi-weekly, however, you incorporate that into your lifestyle. Okay. So the benefits in how uh, Feng Shui can be brought into our life is mentally, speaking of practices, mentally we can start with meditation, okay? Because now that we know what we know now, right? We know, so going back, we know what clutter is. We know if we have it, whether it's in our car, whether it's in our work, because it can show up. It shows up in our relationships, right? Do we have, excess of relationships that are causing imbalance, right? We have a clutter of our relationships. That can happen. We have a clutter of, things piling up in our home, our finances, our wallet, our diet. Okay, so really clearing that space out. So, hello, spring cleaning. That's why I brought this podcast episode today. Spring cleaning is the perfect time to actually hear this. So, physically, this may mean obtaining a planner, whether that's a budget planner, you want to declutter your finances, eliminate any subscriptions, eliminate any possible bills to bring harmony back into your finances, that can create expansion in other areas. Your work planner or your home planner to create more expansion in your time, right? This may even show up mentally for you, if not meditation, but your journaling, your vision. What would life look like after trauma? Maybe more peace, right? More opportunity to trust yourself, trust your decisions, right? Building trust of the individuals around you, okay? It may look like going paperless if you have, if you struggle with the idea of keeping paper around, okay? So the idea is to start small, because this can sound like a lot, right? We can become overwhelmed with just hearing the idea that we have clutter in some area of our life, right? And so it takes 15 minutes a day, right? 15 minutes a day, or 3 days out of the week, or maybe 15 minutes at the end of the week, just to really clear the space. Okay. So again, the benefits to really reclaim your space, your time, your mental space, your body, your relationships, all of that. The benefits of this feng shui, right? Not to say that you have to go pick up books or read articles, if that's not your thing, but the idea is to identify the trauma, and identify how it feels in the body, and identify where the clutter is lying around, and how can you create more harmony, more balance, right? So the benefits is, increasing time and money, because you're probably saying, Tanya, why do I want to do this? It sounds like a lot, and it can be overwhelming. That's an honest response, but it increases time and money. I think we all want more of that, right? But when we do that, it's a healthy body, right? Healthy mind, relationships, right? You're releasing any of the cluttered relationships that you have, whether romantic, platonic, family ships, right? Business ships. Sometimes there are individuals that are holding on, and you're not receiving anything from it, right? And so home and work life balance, maybe you create more time to get back to your hobbies. Maybe you create more time for your healing, to speak with your therapist, to step outside in nature. More time with your family, more time networking, creating those nourishing relationships, more self-care, right? Self-preventative care, right? Getting back to the, books, if you need to, educate yourself, or maybe the goal was to get back to school, or maybe the goal was to start something you haven't started that you've been wanting to start. And, the ultimate is joy, what I like to call joy tonic, right? It's full harmony and joy back into your life, right? So you're healing that space, giving yourself grace as well as you take one item at a time to toss it away, and notice what that feels like as you toss it, move it, shift it, donate it, right? Regift it. And yeah, and if you haven't listened to the less is more, how owning less can create owning less with less stress. I believe that's the top of the episode title. You can go back and listen to that one. So the internal and energetic body, as you clear away, right, the benefits of that is, drinking plenty of water, clean eating. You get back to, fresher foods and vibrant and richness in your fridge, right? Sometimes that clutter shows up in the fridge, so we got to feng shui it out, right? Taking herbal supplements, or, indulging in Ayurvedic spices. I know you probably, like, Tanya, wait a minute, what does that mean? But, it's just about, coming back to the natural sources, right? Because when we remove the clutter, it creates more expansion to see, right? To more wisdom, right? To introduce yourself to things that you haven't allowed yourself to get to. Okay, so breath work, that can also support the lungs, right? If you have a lot of clutter in the home space, the car, maybe notice how you're breathing, right? How you're breathing at night. Okay, massage, massage can also help the energetic body with removing any blood clots. If you have blood clots, if that's something you struggle with, varicose veins, poor lymphatic drainage, that can also support. Fibromyalgia, so acupuncture, same thing. Clearing away any blocks, any stagnancy, any clutter in the body. Heated activities like yoga, or going to a sauna can also release toxins. So this goes so much deeper, right? Because when trauma happens, we lose someone, we go through the bad divorce, or we go through or separation, or we witness a violent activity. The body freezes, and I talk about that in Fight Flight Freeze. You can take a listen to that episode. But the body freezes, and what happens is that energy gets stuck, right? We begin to see the world through a different lens. So remember, we see the world differently than we experience it, okay? And so the way we experience it can cause trauma in our home space, our relationships, our finances, our food, our diet, all of that, okay? So as we come to the end of this podcast, this session, right? Excuse the car out there. So I have a homework assignment for you, okay? So that is to journal, right? So I ask that you create 3 categories, right? So you're going to journal. So to help you on this journey to feng shuiing your space, so feng shuiing your mind. I love this episode so much. I actually talked about this. I brought this topic to the University of California, Merced staff and student body, and it's something that we can really hone in on, and it's important. So you're going to create 3 categories, okay? And so the idea is to ask yourself, with each, and I'll go over the list. In these 3 categories, you're going to ask yourself, how can I create more chi, right? How can I create more parts? If using the word chi sounds, awkward, you can definitely, use the phrase, positivity, more harmony in the body, right? If you don't resonate with the word chi, that's perfectly fine. You're not forced to. Remember, anything and everything that I share in these sessions as an invitation, and you can always take what resonates and leave what doesn't. So when you create these 3 categories, you're going to ask yourself, how does this feel? How does this space feel right now? Okay, so the 3 categories, right? So category 1, you're going to list it as your home space, your workspace, and your relationships. Okay, so that's category 1, home space, workspace, relationships. You're going to journal and ask yourself, how do these spaces feel for me? Am I stressed? Am I overwhelmed? Is there something that I need to remove? Is there something that's cluttered? Is it too much? Okay. The second category is your fridge. Woo! Ooh, I know. Your fridge, your mind, and your physical body. Okay, I'll repeat that. That's your fridge, your mind, and your physical body. And the third category is your wallet, your car, and your mobile devices. Woo! Come on, somebody. I know that's a lot. Wallets, car, and your mobile devices. Okay? So you have those 3 categories, and each day you can split this over 3 weeks. You can split it over 3 months, however you wish to do it. But the purpose is to identify what is the trauma, right? When did the trauma happen? Okay? Then you have to go back and you say, what is the clutter, right? What is the clutter, and how do I feel? What did I feel when that trauma happened? Okay? And what needs to be released? We're coming up to spring, and you deserve to have a clear space. You deserve to have space in your mind, right? To come up with the ideas and the creativity and the wisdom, all of the things that you should feel stress-free, right? Because when we procrastination and stress is ultimately fear, right? That's just what it is. And so once you're able to identify the spaces that have clutter, right? Because out of these 3 categories, you may just have one. You're like, whoo, yes, I can now feel clear to move and create the relationships, the friendships, the connections, the networking, get back to the activities, to travel, whatever that looks like for you, to reclaim your peace, right? That's what it's about. It's reclaiming your peace and getting back to the life that you deserve to have. Because somewhere down the line, trauma made you pause, okay? And there's stagnancy. And so you go with what works and what's needed for you to move and roam this world, freely, in harmony, right? With the chi that you need. So I like to bring this episode to a close. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. We're coming up to spring, and spring is about rebirth, renewal, new beginnings, and purging. And so it's we have to come back to ourselves and self-examine, right? The mind and the body. So I ask that you live abundantly, love your authenticity, and radiate organic happiness, but most importantly, live a life of no more trauma. Namaste, trauma free, and I'll see you back in the next episode session. Bye.